Breaking news right now. I'm going to get to this to you from Reuters. Guess what? As early as tomorrow, we may see some new policy being announced by the Biden administration. They are set to tighten asylum access at U.S.-Mexico border via new regulation that could be issued as soon as tomorrow. Apparently, that whole open season, come one, come all, that thing hasn't really been playing so well in Peoria, as they say. And what are now the biggest issues for Joe Biden in his reelection? The border and the economy. Oh, and then you get all the protesters at school campuses all over the country. Apparently, even in Colorado now, they're just protesting everything. Like they've taken this and they're like copycatting it everywhere they can. It doesn't even have to be about Israel and Gaza. They're just going to protest anything. So he's got protests in the streets. The students that were supposed to be with him because of all his environmental stuff, they're not with him. And everyday Americans are saying, gosh, you allowed some 8 million people into the country unchecked. And those are the ones that we know about. And so now he's coming out with a plan to tighten asylum access at the U.S.-Mexico border via a new regulation that could be announced as soon as tomorrow. He does this while simultaneously coming out with a plan for tariffs in China. Drew, do we have this clip from the New York Times? I think a little graphic. It shows all he plans to do to deal with the economic threat that is China, not just economic, but also national security threat that is China. So the New York Times did a little breakthrough for us. And one of the top things in all of that happens to be tariffs. He wants tariffs. Isn't he the guy that said, we're going to wind up in some kind of major problem with the Chinese because Donald Trump wants all these tariffs? Oh, he's announcing nearly 300 new sanctions on Chinese companies, on international suppliers of military equipment technology that the administration has been helping Russia restock its arsenal as it carries out the war in Ukraine. You also have this little number. So Blinken's over there promising all those Chinese banks that because they have been aiding Russia, they're going to sanction them. Kind of seems like a logical move. I mean, to me, I'm a big believer in using every financial weapon you can as opposed to actually losing lives. And so if you're going to threaten sanctions, you ought to be able to follow through on them. It's one of the things that I actually really admired about Donald Trump and continue to admire about him because he actually understands the nitty-gritty of how you can use economic tools that are at your disposal in order to actually get what you want. No one was willing to play tough with China. Biden and the administration kind of poo-pooed him and made fun of him for all those tariffs. In fact, I'm going to show you a clip. They've used this clip, and if you listen to the entire thing, we're just going to play the part on tariffs. But he goes on after talking about how we need tariffs with Chinese companies that are trying to move jobs to Mexico and then send those products over the border. He's like, no, we're not going to have them. And he said, if we do, you know what? It's going to be a bloodbath. And then they really used that against him, trying to say that somehow it was going to be a bloodbath, Civil War type stuff, when all he was talking about was the economy and the economic implications of what it would mean for China if they, in fact, were to do this. Well, now Biden's talking the same thing. It's just, the media spins it a little bit differently. Let's go back to Donald Trump saying, I think he was in Michigan, how we actually need to think about what China's doing, especially as it relates to our hemisphere. Here we go.
I'm going to save your industry, and we're going to make your industry much bigger because we're going to put tariffs on cars that are coming into our country. I don't know if you know it. By the way, before I do with Mike, China is building some of the largest auto plants in the world along our border in Mexico, and they think they're going to take those cars and sell them into the United States and lose all your jobs in Michigan. And you ought to tell the head of the auto workers, as a union boss, he stinks, because what he's allowing to happen to you as union workers, and we're going to get 95% of the auto workers anyway, but we're going to put tariffs on those cars, and we're not going to let them sell those cars in the United States. We're not going to let it happen.
We're not going to let it happen. I think people actually believe him, too, when he says that. And they should believe him because, again, this is a guy who's quite willing, ready, and able to use whatever tariffs need to be used on China to actually improve the trade scenario. I mean, we actually had improvement. We were actually starting to see that our trade picture looked a whole lot better under Donald Trump. And then, of course, we regressed under Joe Biden. And we could regress some more.